very quickly. Welcome to 22 Woodland Road, the Vine. You will be entering the house through the door that came from Royston Hall. It was broken, had its back broken by the council when they were restoring, but it's a door of about 1820. So if you'd like to come through into what is being called the entrance hall, I believe, which I never did call it that. While we're down here, we'll look at the fireplace that is on across there, which is 1631 and came from Royston Hall again. Was actually in Maitland Sartris's bedroom, and two panels which were in the middle bay in Royston Hall, which are really the front of a chest. But a lot of people like those because it's rather a charming line with a smile. So if we go up the stairs and see, as you enter, it's a dog leg staircase. The pictures are on it, and it's a good wall for pictures because you have a high wall, obviously. We have a good picture here of the Duke of Grafton. Not sure who by, but one of the illegitimate grandsons of Charles II. The two pictures of the ladies are from a house in Daventry called Churchill, and were commissioned by a man named Burton, who had rather a good opinion of himself and put the Burton Monument up in the middle of Daventry, which has been a little bit controversial ever since. The picture on the top there is actually painted by a man who did scenery painting and was a friend of the author of The Naked Silver Servant, but it is a good portrait of Henry VIII. The face, I think, is excellent. The other is scenery, really. The tapestries behind me were a series I designed for my mother. My mother embroidered them, I drew the patterns, and then she finished them. But we have a third one to do, and it's basically the history of Royston Hall. Much in the building is to do with Royston Hall. You could say I'm prejudiced. All of the carving on the staircase is mine at different times. The gentleman on the horse is my grandfather, because we have a photograph of him on a horse, and his grandmother is this one here, which is the one I'm doing at the moment. She was the landlady of the Wagon and Horses in Royston, and sorted out the navvies when they got fighting, when they were digging the tunnels in Shamrock. Kitchen is nothing particular, just created a lot of it out of shuttering ply with a bit of paint. But the shelf did come from Parson's cottage at Irchester, which is now gone. And we then go into the dining room. I had to accommodate the beams. In the other house I had beams of oak. In this one they're all pine beams, and they're beams that came from a dairy in Northampton. So we started to paint them, and that really started when putting colour in. Nothing particular in here except it's just the cornices are Georgian. The shell cupboard in the corner came from Parson's cottage again in Irchester, and it's a shell cupboard, beautiful piece. The top is rather like a chocolate orange, and it consists of 36 separate segments, but it's a lovely piece. One I shall regrettably have to leave, I think. The fireplace came from Banbury, the marble fireplace, and the ceiling was just decorated as one wanted, just to give a whim in that sense. The pictures are all in here are all of the hall, or most of them, and the two there that are being shown are by Jeremy Barlow, and I got them before Jeremy's price went quite as high as it is today. The marble slab over here is from Jim Buckby's shop, which local people will know about, and is actually the drain piece right at the front. And the legs underneath, the wooden legs, were put out of a place that belonged to Bates, the cabinet maker, and I think he cannibalised the actual unit, but I got the legs, and they're actually sitting on 14-inch brick piers, because this takes 3 men to lift. The door, again, it's the front door. We did move this from Washbrook Road. My grandfather cut this out of the original front door, and we put in the new glass, which best from this side, which are the arms, the crests of Lord Lyveden. They came from Firmin Woods when they demolished the Victorian portion. And the moulded glass, which a lot of people like, came from Royston Hall, were not reused and were found in the mud. And the brass handle came from the Robin Hood pub at Rawn's. Right, if we then go into this is the lounge. We call it the lounge. It is variously put as the Great Hall, which is a bit conceited, but it's the same idea. And this was designed to be a large room. It is actually 9 feet high to take the pictures, and we decided to drop the floor level rather than fill it in, if you like. The pictures were acquired at different times. The one at the top, the little lady at the top, I'm not sure of, but I've got a friend who would love to have that picture. She might get it yet. Sir William de Capelbrook is the gentleman below in black. The Unknown Gentleman with a Hound is probably the best painting out of them. But the one in the middle is one of my favourites. Is Catherine of Braganza, the wife of Charles II. Much loved, but obviously he had many lady friends as well. And the one on the right is Lady Bannister. We're told that her husband was the financial man in the Inner Temple. He embezzled the books, and the original pictures hung at Hinnock House. And this one was relegated to the back stairs, and they supposedly have cut the picture up of her husband in disgust. I think the fireplace has both from the other end. That usually causes some comment. The pillars came from the Methodist chapel in Park Road and were originally a doorway. The bricks underneath are what was left of the Rawn's brickyard, so they're quite well, you can't get them anymore. Good brick originally. The coat of arms over the top is the Royal Arms, and was acquired from a gentleman who was in demolition, and he got it from North London when they demolished a garage, and it was the garage that supplied the cars for King George V. So underneath the Deo Fidelis et Deo Regii, underneath it's got by appointment. I'd cover that over. And Queen Victoria, or the bust of Queen Victoria, was a gift to her godson from the Queen to a gentleman who eventually became Lord Suffield, who was a shooting partner of Edward VII. The little cupboard inside was made up of pieces of wood from a house in Earls Barton that belonged to a Mrs. Campbell Caven. It used to be a pink house, and my grandfather made it into a little cork cupboard really. But the story with Mrs. Campbell Caven was that she was supposed to keep lions in her house, a little bit eccentric, and whenever she obviously had new furniture, because it is only Victorian, she threw the old furniture into the garden. So when the sale came, we just cannibalised what was in the garden. So this is another piece of it. Don't think there's anything else more to say on that, not that I can think of. That's a cupboard that again came from Mrs. Ripley, as did the table over there. Mrs. Ripley was the sister of Husartras, and Husartras was the owner of Royston Hall, the last squire of Royston. But that's a good armoire, about 1660 something of that, on a Victorian base. The table is where I used to sit with and have tea with Mrs. Ripley. Mrs. Ripley was a very deaf lady. She had about 15 or 16 dachshunds. She used to bark constantly. She used to shout at them at the top of her voice. Didn't take any notice, but it was always rather nice to go there for tea. She was in her 90s, and I usually tell the story that we used to have plum cake, which she'd acquired from a hunt ball or somewhere, and it was all right as long as you didn't look when she was cutting it, because she used to cut it up with the same knife that she'd cut all the meat up for the dogs. So it was a bloodstained knife before she cut your piece of cake. But I've survived, and it was a very, very, very nice, very fond memories of her. She was a wonderful old lady. Lived at Weekley, the cottage. We then go up to, I think we then return to the stairs. Nothing, that came out of a house in Church Street, just a crest. I was starting to do what I call the Chevy Chase round here, but I shall not complete that, and it's based on Higham Park. So you have a figure of King Henry II, and he sent deer to Kingscliff Park, and the gentleman on the far end is the falconer who worked in Higham Park. Higham Park is in Newton, near Newton Road, near Newton Parish rather, but it is actually in Royston. Come up the stairs. I wanted a landing, which I've got, and on it we've got a cabinet. This was originally a dark brown egg cabinet, and was full of eggs which you can't give away or dispose of, but I think I'm all right to have them. But it causes quite a lot of interest. It was given to me when I was 11. I didn't take any of the eggs, and I decorated this when I was a teenager, I suppose, so it's been around quite a while. I wanted a Chinese cabinet, and really the first piece of carving I did was this apron down here. And 40 years later I started again. and carved the various pieces on the staircase. The arch through here is from Smith's house in Raunds, tannery in Raunds. Children set fire to it, and this rather nice work, which might well have been done by my great-grandfather, because he was a carpenter and he worked for the people who probably built it. The enfilade, I hope that's right, is the glass mirrors either end, which gives you a never-ending vista. It goes on and on and on as far as you can see. And the mottled glass in the top segments are from Percy House's shop, jeweller's shop. We replaced the glass. Right. Another fireplace in here. All the doors came from a house in Grove Road and were stripped, so they're just ordinary good Victorian 4-panel doors. Fireplace in here came from Royston Hall, and that's one that I should probably give back to the hall. I rescued it because it was all thrown out. The cupboard in the corner is my grandfather's piece. He never finished it, and it's still not finished, so it won't be by him. And my great-grandfather carved the panels. The door behind then is from Firmin Woods. Lived in from Firmin Woods' house, and is rather a beautiful door. One that really needs restoring. I can't afford it, and it weighs a ton to move. It's very delicate, but it's a beautiful piece of work. One would assume about 1810. And this is a door from the manor house at Wymington. So that would be 1660, sort of. Most dates are approximate. This is just my whim that I never did finish. I wanted a tented bathroom, so I painted it on the top. I've never finished the tassels, and the actual decorative part is based on some paintings by Mary Moser, who I believe did paintings for the royal family, but they were a lot better quality than that. We then briefly look in Mother's room, principally to look at the cupboards, because they were painted and fitted in Washbrook Road, in her bedroom there, and she flatly refused to move unless we moved the cupboards. So we moved the cupboards, and I mean, Mother would have moved, but that was her threat. So, but they've turned out quite well, and they last quite well. They look quite. There's no. They're aging quite well, really, in that sense. But otherwise, it's just general furniture. Food hutch came from Clopton House when. Well, it was sold up in a Clopton House. It's a food hutch with a date of 1500 on it, which is not really true. It's probably quite old, but it's not that genuine. And then you come into the master bedroom, which is another collection. Cupboards, another shell cupboard, which I particularly like. The panelling and the cupboard all came from a house in Northampton, in Newland, which was the Georgian development of Northampton, and it was all demolished for the Grosvenor Centre. So we moved all this panelling, and again, I mentioned before, or should have done, a lot of it you got for 20 players, and I got all of this room and a wing chair for 20 players, and the other shell cupboard downstairs I got for 20 players. It was good currency in the 60s. The bed came from a house next door to me in Moor Road, prior to Washbrook Road, and that belonged to an elderly gentleman. He died, and his daughter, another equally elderly, cut the top off because she was fed up with it, dusting it. So she got rid of it, and then she gave it to me for painting her bedroom, and having cut the top off here and at the top, my grandfather then, when I got it, spliced it back together. So this is a piece of my grandfather's work, which he put together, and it stood on his lawn for quite a while, being restored. Didn't do it any harm, but an early Victorian, one would think, at a guess. It's very difficult to date it. Some things are easy to date and some things not. The cylinder desk is another William IV piece, which I had to have restored. Cluttered as usual, I'm afraid, like all desks are, but a nice piece, and came from Ireland, and it had been painted brown when I had it, so we had to have it restored. But the thing I like about it is we actually had an address in there where it came from, and there was a garden plan in there with a bush in it called Seawood. So I think it was intended that I should have it. So I quite like that. I regret getting rid of it, but I've restored it, so it's done some good. The chair, exceedingly good chair, 1695. from Royston Hall, and one I should probably have to go because it does need careful attention. And this is a little chair which I shall keep is FUS, little rush seat, and it was the child chair of Frederick Urban Sartres, who was the first Sartres who purchased Royston Hall, and only I knew at the sale what fudge stood for, so I got it with very reasonable price. Nobody knew what it meant. So. And I think that more or less completes it really. We have a Queen Anne lowboy there. Cupboard that I've painted. I've always painted things, so it's and that's something that's never really been seen because it's always been cluttered. So hopefully, when I move, I should put it somewhere where I can see it. And I think that probably concludes our visit. There's nothing I can think of particularly without going into lots of detail. Yeah, the final on the clock, I suppose, came from Miss Clayton, who lived next door to us in Washbrook Road. That's a nice. She used to work. Her father used to work for Lord St John. And a lot of the things I've got, I like associations with. Funnily enough, on the front of the house, which we won't see, but there is a lead waterhead from Melsman Park, and Melsman Park was the home of Lord St John. I did intend just showing the lead light in here. That's out of Lads' Shoe Factory, and that was in the office. They wouldn't let me have it before they pulled the factory down, so we had to take it out of the ruins really. But they're quite nice, be about 1880 bullions, and they're in all the top floor windows, whereas the ground floor windows are stained glass, are from Risdy, the house in Higham Road that has been demolished, and again Victorian, more decorative.
We'll finish off with the outside of the house, Clive. Let's go outside, yes, shall we?
Right,
yes, thank you for that. Thank you for the tour.
You're welcome. Do we have to rush? I mean,
no.
Back. We will look at the back of the door. This was painted again on the Royston Hall door, but I painted it to look like panelling. Some people it falls and some not, but if you go to Powys Castle, they've got an entire gallery like that. As I mentioned again, on the outside you've got the Tudor porch, which is a genuine Tudor. It's actually a fireplace. The archway around the door, and that was the fireplace to again in Royston Hall. On the top you've got two stone balls. That one came from Newnham Priory and is covered with lead and is pockmarked where people shot pellets at it, but this one came from Royston Hall. On this side you've got the lamp that came from Royston House, which was the sanatorium, and that was on the drive, and they took it out for some reason, I don't know why. I will mention it here, but it's not for broadcasting anyway. The iron gates actually came from off the market house in Oundle and came out of a scrapyard. they were going, so I got those. But, in actual fact, they couldn't go back to Oundle because Oundle is it's a building now. There's no, it was just an archway. And the waterhead up there, 1900, came from Melsman Park, and that's the crest of the Lord St John. And that's when it was actually put in, whereas it's on a square downpipe that came from the Carp Shoe Factory. The window there, which is easy to see from outside than in, came from Banbury Waterworks. That's the latest thing we put in. We put that in 2 or 3 years ago. They demolished the entire works in Banbury, and there are lots of beautiful windows. They came out of a greengrocer's shop in Wellingborough named Davis. I don't know where they came from, but they were in the back of his shop. At the back we've got another date stone JW, which one can say is John Wood. It's not, but it could be. Came from Findon, so a little bit earlier. Confuses some people when the house starts at 1900 at the back and it's 1763 rather at the front and 1763 at the back. They say it took you a long while to build it. The ironwork came from a house or a bungalow in Weedon, and I think it was only survived from the war because it was in a field almost. But lovely cast iron work, which Northampton would have been full of course, at one time. The turnstile came from Royston Swimming Baths. There's somebody who's very anxious to have that. Where they get it, I'm not sure yet. The lamp is also has a connection because at the bottom, which is difficult to see, you've got RUDC when the councils actually put their initials onto their property. The tiles on the summer house came from the rectory when they demolished part of that to turn it into an old people's home. The grill there came from the nunnery at Rothwell, was actually in a pigsty. but it's a nice building, nevertheless, even being a pigsty. And the yellow bricks that are included anyway are from the Co-op shop in High Street South. They're what we call Cambridge Whites. The bricks all came from Earthlingborough, from a place called the Vine, a pub. So it fitted in with the name that I wanted to do, because I wanted to call it the Vine because my great-grandfather built a house in Fitzwilliam Street which was called Grapevine Cottage. That was his wedding present to his wife, I believe. But it was nice to come on, as this is 22, the same number, this became the Vine, and if I get a new house, I'm already decided I should call it the Little Vine. So, all right.
Thank you, Clive, very much for showing us around your lovely home. And we wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you.